Hello everyone, back tuning in to Solar Sunday. So I was having a look on the solar updates page, and we haven't done a Solar Sunday, can you believe, since the 16th of August. It's been over 6 months since I did a specific video just looking at solar activity. So I thought it was time I did it, and this is it. We're going to have a look at what's going on the sun. We're going to have a look at how the solar cycle number 24 is progressing, how we're dropping into the minimum phase of this solar cycle, or whether we're dropping into the minimum phase of this solar cycle. We'll also talk a little bit about the winter just gone, winter 2015-2016. It's not a verification for the winter forecast. That will be coming up in a few days' time. I'll be verifying the winter forecast, but this is just going to have a quick look at the winter just gone in terms of solar activity, comparing it to an old solar cycle back in the Victorian era. We spoke a lot about this in the winter updates. Of course, although I say we haven't done a Solar Sunday since August last year, solar activity did play a big part within the winter update, so not like we ignored it for months and months and months. So the winter forecast, a big part of that was about solar activity, so that's why I want to talk about the winter just gone for this Solar Sunday update. And we will be having a look to see where things are progressing as well. So before I get on with all of that, though, just to say about the ads, there's links to articles on all the pages. Have a browse widgets and click through the links if there's any articles that you're interested in. Thanks very much for doing that. There's video ads on most pages. They open up in the content, and when you've watched them, they'll close back up again. So give them a watch and see what they are all about. There's more ads from Amazon appearing within the display banners. This is not related to Gav Shop. Gav Shop is still on the website. If you've got any shopping, not necessarily Chris shopping yet, of course, but if you've got any shopping to do at Amazon, you just go to Gav Shop and click through the Amazon banners there and go off and do your shopping at Amazon, and as you know, we get a review fee on what you're purchasing. But the ads on all the other pages from Amazon that are beginning to emerge, they're just classic display or pay-per-click ads, so you don't need to buy anything for these to be working for Gav service. We just get a revenue fee every time they are displayed to you, or every time you just click through those ads. But as I say, they are not related to Gav Shop. Gav Shop is something separate, and you do your shopping via Gav Shop and all of that kind of thing. And just say thanks very much for engaging with the adverts. They do keep us completely free of charge. We're able to give all of these updates to you via the website because the ads allow us to remain free. We don't need to go off and do subscriptions or anything like that. We just remain completely free of charge via the adverts and by you engaging with those ads. So thanks so much to all of you for your ongoing support of the website. Can you believe we are coming up to our 4th birthday on the 8th. On the 8th of March, we'll be 4 years old. It's hard to believe that we've been going that long, but it's really down to all of you guys for all of the support that you've given us, and to keep coming back and watching all of our updates, engaging with the advertisements and all of that. It's allowed us to get to our 4th year, and we are going from strength to strength, with many months over the past few months getting over 100,000 page views here at the website. So big thanks to all of you. Right, I better get on with Solar Sunday. I've gone on for far too long. I didn't mean to go on that long, so I better get on with it. And we're going to start off with the sun. Actually, this is the solar disk on our side of this today from solarham.net, and solar activity is officially designated as being at very low levels. There are hardly any sunspots to be seen. There's one over there. Actually, I better change the colour of the highlighter. So there's one over here, another cluster just here, one here, a couple of new ones sparking off just there, and then one over here. Generally not a lot going on though, and as I say, solar activity is officially designated as being very low on our side of the solar disk today. So this is the solar cycle sunspot number progression chart from NOAA. NOAA in the United States. This is comparing solar cycle number 23 to the current solar cycle number 24. So you see that solar cycle number 23 was a big solar cycle with a peak occurring just here, and then we drop down into a long solar minimum through here before we eventually around 2009, 2010, just here, started to move up into solar cycle 24. And this has been the maximum of solar cycle 24 just here, and look how much weaker it's been compared to the maximum of solar cycle number 23. A much weaker solar cycle, and unusually we got the double peak, yes, and that's not unusual, but usually the second peak was stronger than the first peak. So the first peak of solar cycle 24 occurred just here at the end of 2011. The second peak, which was a little bit stronger, occurred at the start of 2014, just here. That's quite unusual to get the second peak stronger than the first peak. Normally, as the solar maximum occurs with the first peak. That had happened with solar cycle 23. So here is the first peak of solar cycle 23 back around the year 2000, I think around July 2000. The second peak occurred in 2002, but you can see that it wasn't as strong as the first peak. The first peak is normally the strongest peak out of the two. So what we've done with this solar cycle is quite unusual. Anyway, we're dropping down into solar minimum now. The trend line tells us when we're going to be in solar minimum, when we should be in solar minimum. That'll be around 2018, 2019, so only a couple of years to go before we're into another solar minimum. And we are dropping down quite obviously now. The blue line here is the mean line, and you can see that quite clearly. We are moving down into that solar minimum that's going to occur in a couple of years. This is where we are right now with very low solar activity. We're back around sort of 2010, 2011 levels just in this zone just here. So we're going to continue to weaken this solar cycle over the next few months. It's not a linear process. We may get a peak, not a peak, but may move up a little bit with solar activity. But all the time, going something like that all the time, the trend will very much be downwards. If you have a look at this chart, this was sent to us by James, our good friend James Ackroll, and he supplies many of the charts that we use for the solar updates. It's a bit of a solar expert. I know James is going to be watching, so thanks very much to James for supplying us with all of these charts. Every chart that you see from now on actually will be by James. I couldn't do these solar updates, and when I get to winter updates and put the solar elements into those winter updates, I couldn't do it without the input from James. So what we're looking at here is basically what we're just looking at there, only we're concentrating on solar cycle number 24. So this is the sunspot progression of solar cycle number 24. You see we've got the two peaks, the first one occurring just here, the second one occurring just here. So the first peak of this solar cycle was at the end of 2011. The second peak, which was a little bit stronger, occurs at the beginning of 2014, and since then we've been going down. This is where we currently are, and this is updated up to the 1st of March actually, so this is a little bit more updated than the NOAA chart, and you can see that we're very much back into this sort of level with solar activity. So we're sort of back to 2010 levels. We haven't dropped down into proper solar minimum yet. That will be when we go down to that sort of level, or maybe that's a little bit wrong actually. Proper solar minimum will be when we go down into that sort of level. So we're not in proper solar minimum yet, but quite clearly you can see that the trend is down. That's indicated by this rusty line just here. Very much a downwards trend since 2014. We are dropping. I'm probably doing it quite quickly, actually probably a little bit quicker than we would normally do. So we are dropping down in towards solar minimum. This is comparing again solar cycle 23 and solar cycle 24. So here's the last solar cycle, number 23. This is the current solar cycle, number 24. Look how much weaker this cycle is compared to the previous cycle. There's the two peaks, with the first peak of number 23, which occurred in 2000, coming out above the second cycle peak from 2002. And as I say, this is where we are now. And again, you can see how we're trending down. We're in this sort of area just here. And compared to the old solar cycle, number 23, that would place us in this sort of zone just here, which was around where we was in 2004, 2005, just into the start of 2006. The actual solar minimum of number 23 occurred in 2008 to 2009, just here. So we've only got a couple more years to go. If we keep this trend, we are going to. We've only got another couple of years to go before we see this trend line going down, something like that. And that'll be around 2018, 2019. Possibly even into 2020. This is all important, by the way. The reason we are interested in this is because when we have weak solar activity, it tends to coincide with an increased chance of winter blocking. So that's the main reason that we look at this, particularly evident for the UK and Europe. It's less evident for North America, for Asia. It's a phenomenon that's particularly important in terms of how it interacts with the jet stream. I think that's the key, how solar activities interact with the jet stream. It's important for winter conditions. Very often when we're coming out of a solar maximum going into solar minimum, that's actually tends to be the worst time to get cold winters, when you actually get into the solar minimum, and then in the years after solar minimum, that tends to be the best time to get winter blocking. And also quite oddly, I'm not sure why it is the case, also quite oddly, just around the solar maximum, the peak of the solar cycle, you tend to get a colder winter then. But the years that come out of solar maximum, drop down into solar minimum, tend not to be as good for colder winters. So if we have a look at this chart next, which James has sent to us, this chart is depicting solar flux. And what solar flux is, essentially it's the noise that's being given off by the sun. And that noise is representing sort of the sun's output, if you like. It's representing all the particles and the energy that's being thrown out by the sun towards us. So again, when we have the maximum of the solar cycle, we get an increase in solar flux. When we get a minimum of the solar cycle, we sort of reduce the solar flux. We reduce the sun's output, if you like. And I think it's really through solar flux more than anything else that we generate these increased colder winters around the solar minimum, after the solar minimum. I think it's because the sun's magnetic fields and its particles are reduced. It's not churning out much energy, which doesn't niggle the jet stream as much as when we've got more solar activity. So you see that solar flux very much coincides, the peak of solar flux I should say, very much coincides with the solar maximum. So we see here for solar cycle 23 that we get the peak of solar flux occurring around the years that we have the peak of the solar cycle, of the solar maximum, solar cycle 23, which is these years just here, 2000, 2001, 2002. The solar flux then eases off as we go down into solar minimum. Remember, this isn't sunspots. Sunspots we're just looking at on the previous chart. That was depicting sunspots. This is depicting the sun's output, if you like. So it doesn't go as low as we see with the sunspot numbers, but nevertheless, while the sunspot numbers are reducing, so too is the solar flux, and the minimum occurs just around here around the same time that we have our sunspot solar minimum. After that, we get the increase in solar flux over the past few years, but again, just as with the sunspot numbers, you notice that solar flux doesn't peak as high for solar cycle number 24 as it does for solar cycle number 23. And you can see that now we're reducing the sunspot numbers. We're coming out of solar maximum, we're going down into the solar minimum. Yes, once again, we see that the solar flux is also reducing, and that is where we currently are in terms of solar flux. And again, in terms of where we was in solar cycle 23, we're around here. So we're on a par with sort of 2004, 2005, 2006, both in terms of sunspot numbers and in terms of solar flux. So everything is very much on trend to be moving down into solar minimum. Now, there are many sunspot cycles that have occurred. We're at number 24, of course, so we go right way back to the first sunspot cycle, which occurred, well, was observed in the 1700s. And this chart that James has sent through to us shows all of the solar cycles going right way back to solar cycle number 1, which is just here. Solar cycle number 24 is just here. Each one of these solar cycles is depicted by a coloured line, and the current solar cycle is depicted by this red line just here. It's a little bit hard to make it out because we've got so many of these coloured spaghettis, as I like to call them in these sort of charts. We've got so many of them that they all sort of crowd one another out. But it's a little bit easier actually to make this one out than it could be, because we're at the very weaker end of things. So all of these coloured lines are depicting very active solar cycles. Solar cycles had lots and lots and lots of sunspot numbers and very high, of course, solar flux. And you can see back quite clearly the red line, which is solar cycle 24, the current solar cycle, is underneath most of those lines. So we're at the weaker end, very much so, at the weaker end of the solar cycles that we've experienced up to this point. We aren't at the very weakest, which is the very weakest, actually this one just here, which is solar cycle number 6, and then this one just here, which is solar cycle number 5. They are in the Dalton minimum when it's going through a little bit of a mini ice age type situation. So we've been a bit above those Dalton minimum solar cycles, but nevertheless we are down there in with the weakest of the solar cycles in history. You can see that we are trending down, of course, with solar activity. There we go. You can see that we are trending down, and we're still at the weaker end as we're trending down. And most of these solar cycles are trending down at this point. Of course, they're all easing off by the time we get to this point, but we are still we're still there at the lower end of these solar cycles, quite interestingly. And it's going to be interesting to see where this goes from here, actually. Will we sort of go and do something like that, so we end up in the middle of the pack? Will we end up doing something like that and we end up leading the pack and having more solar activity as we drop down into solar minimum than many of these solar cycles have done? Or will we do something like this and have a weaker solar cycle, or get even weaker compared to these historic solar cycles? It'll be very interesting how over the next couple of years we drop down into that solar minimum and where we rank with all those other past solar cycles. Now, one interesting fact that came out when we did the winter update was that this solar cycle, number 24, was very much aligning with an old solar cycle, number 12. Solar cycle number 12 is a solar cycle that occurred between the years 1878 and 1890. And within solar cycle 12, there were a lot of cold, even very cold or severely cold, winters. And it was evident as we did the winter updates that could have been coincidence, of course, but many of these winters that we've been experiencing over the past years. Remember, we had that cluster of cold winters from 2008, 2009 to 2012, 2013. Many of those winters were coinciding with the same winters that were occurring at the same point, hope you're with me, in solar cycle 12. So there's very much an alignment that was apparent between solar cycle 24 and solar cycle 12. This was also apparent between the actual sunspot number. So this chart, excuse me, this chart that James has sent through to us is depicting or comparing really sunspot numbers with solar cycle 12 compared to the current solar cycle number 24. And you can see that the way we've aligned with these two solar cycles has been quite uncanny. Number 24, the current solar cycle, is depicted by these yellow by the yellow lines, whereas the old solar cycle number 12 from the 1800s, that's depicted by these green lines. So you see the way we've been trending with the peaks and troughs of solar cycles 12 and 24, very uncannily similar, really, and we can perhaps see it even better with the trend line. The thick green line is the trend line of solar cycle 12, 1878 to 1890. The rusty red line is the trend line for solar cycle number 24, which is, as you know by now, I've gone on about it long enough during this video, the current solar cycle. You see how closely matched they have been to one another throughout this solar cycle number 24 up to this point. And they still stay very closely aligned, actually, as we're coming out of solar maximum. Remember, solar maximum for both of these solar cycles occurs in this area just here. Since then, we trend down. And again, you see just how closely matched the thick green line, the trend line of number 12, and the thick red line or rusty line, the trend line of solar cycle 24. You see how closely aligned they are to one another. They're trending down very, very similar as we go down into solar minimum. And this is the solar minimum of solar cycle 12. It'll be interesting to see over the next couple of years whether we continue to align into solar minimum with number 24, the current solar cycle, compared to solar cycle 12. So this chart is something that we looked at a lot during the winter updates, and this is the alignment of the winters of these two solar cycles. So the green box just here is the first winter of centering temperature of solar cycle 12. So it's 1877, 1878 just here. The yellow box, or the orange box, is the first winter of solar cycle 24, the current solar cycle, 2007, 2008. And you see that first winter of both solar cycles comes out milder than average. The winter centering temperature of both of those solar cycles was milder than average. The second winter, though, goes colder than average, as does the third winter of both of the solar cycles. That goes colder than average, and so too does the third winter of both solar cycle 12 and solar cycle 24. Then the fourth winter, look at this, it goes milder than average, very much trending with one another throughout all of those first four winters of the two solar cycles. We get a deviation for the fifth winter, which is 1882, 1883, and 2012, 2013. The winter of solar cycle 12, 1882, 1883, is milder than average. And as we know, 2012, 2013 was colder than average. So, a bit of a deviation there. That's the one that did break apart. But we go back to the next winter, which I think we're up to the sixth winter now, and we're going milder than average, significantly milder than average, with both of those winters. The seventh winter, very similar, really, a little bit milder than average for the solar cycle 12 winter, 1884, 1885. The corresponding winter of 24, which is 2014, 2015, of solar cycle 24, that is a little bit colder than average, but overall not a great deviation. And basically, you can say both of these winters are aligned. Average is just that one, the old winter in the 1800s, comes out a little bit milder than average, whereas the winter of 2014, 2015 comes out a little bit colder than average. There's only a few tenths of a degree in it, so basically we would say these are very similar winters coming out with an average central England temperature. That brings us up to the eighth winter of these two solar cycles, and that's the winter just gone. And you see that suddenly we absolutely break apart from this apparent connection between the two solar cycles. So the winter of solar cycle 12, the 8th winter of solar cycle 12, is 1885-1886, and that is significantly colder than average, whereas the 8th winter of 2015-2016, depicted by this yellow box, that is very significantly, almost record-breakingly milder than average. So what's happened there is that the apparent connection, and it's quite strange because actually the solar numbers, the solar spots are still aligning. The way we're dropping into solar minimum with these two solar cycles is still very, very close. But the actual winters of these two solar cycles have completely flipped, broken apart, and there's no, of course, they're complete polar opposites of one another. There's no connection at all now between these two winters. So what's going to be interesting as we go on beyond this is going to see whether we go back towards the trend, because of course we know that in 2012, 2013 we went a bit colder than average, and the corresponding winter in the 1800s was a bit warmer than average. So we've already done this once, but not to this degree. It'll be interesting, and after that we went back to trend, but following winters align very closely once again. So after we've broken this apart, it'll be very interesting next winter, 2016-2017, whether we go back to the trend, and if we do, it should give us a colder winter. Just here we can see that we should get a colder winter if we go back to the trend, because in the winter in the solar cycle 12 was 1886-1887. So if we go back to the alignment, we should get a colder winter for 2016-2017, and then the following winter, interestingly, should also be colder than average. What went wrong this winter? Let's just have a quick look at this before I go. This is the comparison of the 1885-1886 and 2015-2016 El Nino events. James has sent this through to me just a few minutes ago. I dropped this on him and asked if he could send this through to me just before I recorded this. So thanks so much to James for getting this updated for me so quickly. This is what I think could have gone wrong. We know that the sunspot activity, or the sunspot numbers, and probably, I would assume, the solar flux, has carried on aligning closely between the two solar cycles through this winter that's just gone. The big difference is in terms of El Nino, because 1885-1886 was an El Nino. There was an El Nino event going on. We talked about this quite a bit in the winter updates, and that is depicted by this blue line just here, which tells us where we peaked in terms of that El Nino event in 1885-1886. And it was a pretty weak one. It was only around a degree, 1.2, 1.3 Celsius as a positive anomaly. Look how much stronger the current El Nino event has been. That goes up to here, almost off the scale, around 2.5 degrees above average. That's a much, much stronger El Nino event. And I think that probably doesn't explain all of the difference between these two winters that we've seen. But it probably has been a big player, and especially, I think, that is especially true for what happened in December, because much of that positive anomaly that we're just looking at for this winter, much of that occurs in December, which was an absolutely extraordinarily warm month. And I think the El Nino is probably largely responsible for what happened there. The constant stream of warm tropical southwesterly winds being dragged up from the tropics, I think a lot of that is down to the El Nino event, nearly a record-breaking El Nino event that we had this winter. And the difference between the two winters, 1885, 1886, 2015, 2016, in terms of the strength of that El Nino, is very striking. Interestingly, before I go, we see that the trend from 1885, 1886 into the following winter, 1886, 1887, was down into La Niña. Look at that, we dropped down from the El Niño just here into La Niña just here. It wasn't a particularly strong La Niña, it was sort of weak to borderline moderate, and that coincides with a cold winter. It'll be very interesting to see where this goes just here in relation to where this went back in 1886 and 1887. Right, I've gone on for a very long time with this update. The upshot is that we are very much trending down with solar activity. We're going back into solar minimum. We aren't yet in solar minimum. That will occur around 2018 to 2019, but we're certainly on our way down towards that level, and solar activity will continue to drop, not in a linear fashion. There'll probably be little peaks upwards, but we'll continue to drop overall down into solar minimum. When we get to solar minimum, we should have a greater chance of getting some colder winters, especially as we come out actually of that solar minimum. We begin the new solar cycle number 25. And then of course we've got the questions about the coming winter, which we'll be talking about much more I'm sure when we start winter updates in September. And just say about solar cycle 25, which is the next solar cycle, been a lot of interest about that in terms of how weak it's going to be. Will it be like a Dalton minimum type solar cycle? There has been speculation it might be. We should start getting some predictions coming through any time now, because we're well past solar maximum. Normally you have to wait until you come out of solar maximum to begin to get predictions for the next solar cycle. We should start getting some predictions any time for solar cycle number 25. So I'm going to keep an eye on it. I keep a regular check on Google to see whether any predictions have turned up from the likes of NASA. I think we'll get something soon appearing about solar cycle number 25, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens with that. I'll be keeping an eye on it for you, and of course subsequent Solar Sundays we'll discuss that much more as the predictions begin to come through. Right, how long have I gone on for? I've gone on for a very long time in this update, much longer than I anticipate I would. I've gone on for over 30 minutes. Very sorry about that. I find all of this absolutely fascinating. I hope you enjoy these very rare, I only do 2 or 3 of them a year. Hope you enjoy these very rare Solar Sunday updates. Bit of a special day for me, so I hope I didn't go on too long and he wasn't too dull. Right, that's all for now. Coming up in a bit, I'll have Terry Scully's first thoughts about the summer. So that's going to be really interesting. We haven't heard anything from Terry yet about the summer. That's going to be rectified on his page. It'll be later on today. So come back for that. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.